Thanks for staying with us. So last week, Wednesday, former President Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential elections in the U.S. This morning, we'll be discussing some parts of what this election means to Nigerians, especially those of us who live abroad, who live in Nigeria, who are aspiring to go to America. Also because some Nigerians were celebrating the presidency of Donald Trump. Others were completely for Kamala Harris. What are the dynamics with these elections? Also, recently, a Nigerian pastor was in the U.S. to celebrate Donald Trump, and he was followed with lots of criticism. Why would he be preaching on the pulpit, talking about holiness and righteousness, and then you supported Trump, who is a convicted felon, who is a racist, who is the object of white supremacists? So many angles. What are your own thoughts on this? We're going to be having a guest who is a social entrepreneur and a public affairs analyst, Mr. Chukwuma Ephraim Okenwa, who will be joining us. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, I'll come to you in a minute, but let me come to the ladies first. I mean, Trump, everybody's talking about Trump and Kamala. We discussed it last week, everybody was discussing it, but we kept mum because it took a while to take it in, you know, because the reality was like, okay, because many of us really wanted Kamala. But what are your thoughts? Who would like to go first? Just before I come to Chukwuma's... Sorry?
America caught us on our ways. You see the margin. It's only us that we were voting for Kamala from. The Americans had no business in our... They did not send us, really. They went out. At least we will not rate them as we rate INEC. We will not disrespect their electoral body with the distrust that we have for our own. So they went out and people actually casted votes. The way we saw it total out, and nobody will be shouting that the election will happen there. Certainly, the people of the land had different agenda. They don't support the Democrats so far. I personally, since Obama, have lost faith. I don't have interest. Because if you see where I carried the matter on my head, I remember that night we did not sleep.
Obama's all right.
Only for him to become president, and he had an anti-African agenda. Personally, I have no love for him. Gaddafi was lost under his watch, and a lot of other things happened to Africa. So you can be on their side.
Let me come to you, Mariam. What are your thoughts?
I think the very last one I watched was the first time around Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I was looking forward to seeing a female president, at least in America. And when that didn't happen, when that did not happen, I just thought, these Americans, they are hypocritical.
I'm telling
you go around the world talking about female representation, but you really, when you put a woman, beside a man who is less qualified, you always pick the man above. Yeah. So I wasn't shocked by this time, what happened this time around, because apart from being a woman, I also added the fact that she's black. And if she had won, that would have shocked me. I would have said, oh, Americans, you're finally, being more accepting.
It didn't matter she was married to a Jewish man.
No, it did not matter, because she is the face. She would have been the face of their government. But for me, it's I wish Americans the best. And then for Nigerians that are living there, I hope that this means better for them. And if not, as Nigerians, we're always resilient. We'll find our way around. Just...
So what are your thoughts when Donald Trump was announced?
So I deliberately didn't follow the elections, because the little I saw, it was just like Nigeria. It was a lot of hate. There was a lot of negativity. There was a lot of... It was because in Nigeria we are very... Okay, taking the US elections I followed, and this particular one, this was worse. The language of the election wasn't good. There were lots of trading of insults. It felt like I was watching a third world country go into an election. There were name-calling on a higher level. I felt this is just so much bitterness. I don't want to deal with this. America should handle itself. Let me focus on my country. I want to focus on Nigeria and how Nigeria would work, not whether America works for Americans or not. However, the truth is, when a world leader as strong as America changes the leader, changes governments, there will be impacts that would go around every other country. Because the last time Donald Trump was president, the tariff he was saying he was going to put on China and other countries, the language, the crisis that happened based on his leadership, we know that if anything goes wrong with the US, it will affect a lot of other countries. So we shouldn't say it doesn't concern us directly. because it will concern us indirectly. So I definitely, but I celebrate Trump's resilience and his determination. You know, in the face of everybody thinking he's a convict, he cannot win. This has only happened once ever. Over 100 years ago, the guy sat down there and kept speaking his own policy, speaking to his people. Right. And his people came out to vote. If we think about it in Nigeria, it means that anybody can come out, regardless of if you feel he's qualified or not, or people say that he has a record or he spoke badly about people, and if he continues to speak on what his policies are, people can come out and vote.
For me, what is election? What is election? As much as I really wanted Kamala, but I thought Trump winning was actually for me, I found it quite interesting.
Okay.
Interesting because it was so much like ours. We're criticizing our elections that it wasn't based on facts, it wasn't issue-based. It was more emotional. Are you from the north? Are you from the south? Are you this? Are you Yoruba? Are you Muslim? Are you Christian? It was all based on who I like. It wasn't so much of the issues Nigerians were going through. In this case, exactly the same thing. Who cared that Kamala floored him at the debates? Nobody cared. See, when you say politics is local, this is what we've been saying from day one, that politics is local. No matter how much we paint it and try to dress it in different ways, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, it comes back to the people, the grassroots, those who, the originators of your essence. They're the ones that will connect with you. And I think Trump knew that and he went for that. So it's just interesting to say that we are all the same. I wish I remind our Nigerians that we are all the same. I've never forgotten the effect the insurrection had on me personally, because I'm like, oh my goodness, we're exactly the same. The only thing that's different from them and us is that they have a rule of law that actually functions. They have law enforcement that actually ensures that you go to jail for doing bad. Here, some people can get away with it.
But in this case, even the rule of law, we're wondering where it works out with him being re-elected.
So again, since election is about who you want to choose, it's individual. So the people have spoken.
That's the point, Morayo.
People have spoken.
We have the Hispanics, we have the blacks.
Let me bring in our guests. I would let you to talk about it. It's important to hear. I wanted him to also hear our own views and then bring in our guest, as a social entrepreneur and public speaker, to share with us his own views. Mr. Chukwuma, you've heard the ladies. What are your own thoughts on the elections?
Okay, first and foremost, let me say that women globally need to learn how to support themselves. I mean, just like one of the discussants there, or hosts, rightly pointed out, maybe the fact that she's both women and black. And I said, if a male black could become the U.S. president, why not a woman? And you have enough women that constitute a critical mass in the U.S. to actually ensure that the U.S. This time around could possibly maybe have the first female president. And it's really interesting that with the 60th election on board and the 59th one that produced a Biden and Harris, that's after over 240 years of the U.S. elections and all the rest of it. It's very interesting to know that this is the very first time that a woman is even rising to the position of a vice president in a nation that is, armed as democratic.
Exactly.
And so it does feel that to men, where we just gave you opportunity to become vice president the other day, and now you want to be president. You failed the time of the Hillary Clinton, and now you're fielding a Harris. So to some political pundits, that was miscalculation under the guise that the U.S. Is not yet ripe for a female presidency. But of course, it's left for the women folk to decide globally that if all are equally born, then learn to support your own, even in political parties in Nigeria and elsewhere. And even United Nations, I always challenge the United Nations. If one of the goals is gender equality, the fifth goal of the United Nations, and for close to 80 years of the UN existence, we've not had a woman occupy the top job position in the United Nations. Then we need to, yes, in the United Nations. I mean, having a Secretary General, a female Secretary General, that's a little bit of disturbing.
I'm telling you.
All right, Chukwuma, let me come to you. Let me jump in. Go ahead.
So I like that you started from women supporting women. But you see, the example my colleague had mentioned of her being black as well as being female worked against her. If you compare the support Hillary had to what she had, it's very wide. Is it a white agenda against a black person? or just that she's female?
It's not more of a black because, I mean, when Obama, so looking at this very clearly, right? Obama is black, Harris is black. The major thing that is different now, so what is constant between Harris and Obama is they are black. So the only difference, the only variant is the agenda. So if in the same US that we feel that they are against black, you could have a black male president, then perhaps the only crime that Harris committed is she's female.
If you compare her to Hillary, I think the comparison with Obama is, I think the comparison should be with her and Hillary having run for the same office, being the same gender. And the margin in the election results.
The margin could differ, but at the bottom line, at the end of the day, right, of course, with the uniqueness of the US election, where you talk about the role of the electors, right, and assuming that we're to be play out in our own case, where they have 538 electors, in our own case, that will be 469 electors because it's always consistent with the number of congressmen and women. You understand that you have, you know, in their assembly. And so in Nigeria's own case and in their own case, if after an election you discover more states aligning, like in the case of Trump and against Hillary, that's literally show that at the end of the day, he won, even though Hillary had a popular votes.
Yeah.
You know,
okay. So, let me get a few questions in for you.
Mr. Okewa, you hit the nail on the head with the hypocrisy of the Western democracy and the superiority with which they make it look like they are better off than the rest of the world. Like, oh, we are more forward, but how forward are you if you are in the face of equality and the conversation around gender bias is still in our face this much at that level of governance? So I'm happy you pointed it out. But I want to talk about the idea of the campaign message of Trump was America for America. And Nigerians are still following American news, like, and following American elections, like they are planning for you. Because I think we need to talk about the fact that the Americans' plan and the Canadian plan and the UK plan is to use anybody that is coming in. So if they won on the back of America for America, shutting their borders, focusing on growing the American economy, why can't, how do you think it can work in Nigeria, work in Africa, where we focus on, we're not going to, if somebody comes to campaign and say, we will not go to China, China will not be allowed to work in Nigeria, we will not let these other countries work in Nigeria, we will make Nigerian engineering companies work. Do you think that is a language that can work for Nigerians in the next election?
Well, why that may not work, because in diplomacy, you know, of course, I speak now as a diplomat with 2 postgraduates in diplomacy. I can authoritatively say you cannot talk about reciprocity without capacity. So when you are talking about like following what maybe the USA, they are going to impose a 10% tariff like universal now, and that means that whether you are part of the AGOA Act, the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which is going to end by next year, and Trump has stated, well, as for Africans, that's not going to hold water. We're imposing universal tariff 10%, and for China, it's going to be 60%. I mean, for a nation to do that, you need to have the steeds, you need to have the sagacity. You must have built, you must have looked at your strengths. You know, and only like a China and perhaps a Russia could do a little bit of that. But like for African nations, where like, for instance, like small Germany, right? The economy of Germany alone is almost twice that of entire 54 countries in Africa. Yeah. Not to talk about United States, that the economy of the US is about 7 times bigger than the size of 54 countries in Africa. So that means that what this can even push us to do is to begin to look within. How can Africans begin to trade among themselves? Trade in their own currencies, strengthen alliances, more like a United States of Africa, to have a common front to engage on the global stage. Yeah. It's getting tenser and tenser, and of course, further trade wars between US and China is imminent and is going to have dire consequences on struggling and developing economies.
Mr. Okewa, you see, for those of us that have watched US elections for many years, you know, we know the major issues: immigration, abortion, LGBTQ, the economy. You know, these are issues that presidents have debated, and the candidates have debated over the years. But in this election particularly, it wasn't really, it was used as there was more mudslinging than actual issue debating on issues. How do you think we can learn from these last elections? Because I'm trying to compare all the emotions that transpired from theirs to ours, because we saw quite a bit of it in our own last elections, and it divided the country in different parts. So the fact that the issues were somewhat suppressed or even used against, oh, you like LGBTQ, you hate LGBT, you are for abortion, you hate abortion, you want immigrants, you don't like immigrants. These things were used as attacks, not even based on the economic impacts in the country. So what kind of lessons can Nigerians learn from this what we saw in the elections of the United States?
I mean, the major thing we can learn is that when it comes to elections, the core things that impact the nation should be the focus on politicians. And let me say this because it's very important. Yes, of course, we've had like a Trump weighing in issues happening in the Middle East, and same also with Harris, weighing in issues across Europe. What Europe is going to expect in terms of the invasion or the war between Ukraine and Russia. We've heard him also mention things about China, Asian and Indian and even BRICS. Some of these issues came to front burner. But before I begin to lay emphasis on with regards to your question, I observe with keen interest there is a great table either on the part of Harris or on the part of Trump that there was no mention of Africa and what us Africans is going to expect by the virtue of the election of either a Harris
They're too busy
or a Trump.
mudslinging to think of us.
Yes, it does us appear that they were too busy with other things that to them Africa, right, perhaps is inconsequential.
Exactly.
And that should really make us to really reflect, to have a sort of an introspection, to ask ourselves at this point, is it just all about maintaining relationships with other nations, or all about also building capacity?
Yeah.
Yes, we know that as long as the U.S. is concerned, where you have political parties with strong ideologies. So, of course, Republicans are conservatives and they are nationalistic in their agenda. So you talk about stronger border policies, right? Restrictions on immigration, anytime that maybe you have a Republican. And that is why many people were even surprised. Why do you have some Africans rejoicing knowing that Trump has said without missing words that undocumented immigrants in the U.S. Would actually be taken away. Okay. Of course, many of them would be affected. Yeah. So for the Jabba dream is already also being threatened. But Africans should be able to look within and say, okay, so in all of this, where do we really fall in?
Right.
And then to lay more emphasis on it, let's look within as a country.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so I like where you're taking us, because that's the question I was going to ask you. Not Africa now, but just specifically Nigeria. As we know, Donald Trump, in his first time around, has called our continent the word he used, the SH word. He insulted our president at the time and described him as barely alive, And also, this is a country that Nigerians seem to give so much respect that we are excited when there's a sort of endorsement by America. Oh, this person is not allowed to travel to America. They have refused this person, but this one can travel to America, So we accept. It seems that on one hand, they can insult us all they want, and yet we need their endorsement. But now, just given all this that we have heard, and I believe that the Nigeria today is a much more confident and more aware country. How would you say that our president first should conduct himself going forward with this new administration, knowing that this is a man that hasn't shown much respect for us? Secondly, diplomatic relationships between Nigeria and America. How do you think we should structure it going forward to show that, we're a sovereign nation? We do our votes. We do our elections. We don't do mudslinging and everything. We discuss issues.
Yeah, so yes, we're a sovereign nation, and of course, if we actually want to begin to conduct ourselves to the point where we can earn the U.S. respect, and by extension, other African countries also coming together to do that, then we should be able to, it should be more of relationship of equals, right? Yeah. So the same way you have Nigerians pouring into the U.S., Do we have as much as U.S. citizens
pouring
who
into
want to
Nigeria?
experience the hospitality in Nigeria? They want to just visit, and we've not been able to make so much noise of what we have here. I've traveled to all parts of the world, yes, except Antarctica, right? And I can authoritatively say that Nigeria is naturally endowed with tourism potentials. Some of the tourist potentials you could see in some nations are man-made. Ours, we have it all across Lagos, in Bauchi, in different places. We should be able to make noise about this, generate funding from tourism, let people know that the only thing about us is not the fact that the U.S. is, assisting us in counter-terrorism. No, that should not be the only narrative. You know, the energy of Nigerians, I mean, Nigerian energy can be marketed. You can't compare it. You can't match it with the energy of, any other country anywhere. When a Nigerian is naturally in the room, you could feel the difference. You know, I was talking with some of my friends in the United Nations, and they were praising their Nigerian colleague. When she's on the board at the meeting, everything changes instantly because there's an energy we carry, and we need to advertise that. So all of the things that makes us a great nation, we should be able to strengthen our refining capacity by Nigeria first also, not only America first. We're also a nation. Okay. So whatever thing we think that the U.S. is pushing as a way to protect their own borders, because what makes you a sovereign nation is that it should be all about you first. Yeah. And as much as sometimes we want to look at, okay.
Let me go on a short break because I have to go because I actually like what that slogan, Nigeria first. Yeah. You just said it and I think it's fantastic. Nigeria first. You know, that should be, that really should be our slogan. Let's go on a very short break. When we come back and take a few calls and take some social media comments. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back.